I was instructed to wear my dress, blues polished boots, clean shave, and not frown. For the first encounter with a galactic delegation, he desired a human face, a handshake, a grin, and a few prepared comments for the cameras, because they didn't want the Titan behind me didn't whisper. Instead, it roared in, allowing the warship to speak louder than the words we practiced. 57 kilometers of orchestrated anger laced with stillness, with coil weapons that could push cores into stars and destroy moons humanity had not developed. Instead, we had discovered that the universe was a vicious predator that did not reward good deeds. We didn't invoke her judgment, because we believed we were gods. No gods pleaded for it. I stood on the viewing deck as the foreigner, and merciful judgment gave me none. The envoy's vessel glided into place, next a sleek, gleaming building that resembled Athi dubbed themselves the Soldari, a petal courted the wind. Like oil on water, their tall, blue-skinned eyes had communicated dozens of messages of peace. Species had. But peace did not restore new life or save the Mars settlements. Hail my Kyoto commander. They've Dr. touched my communication copy on my way to the delegation room's final call. But I didn't after what transpired with the Zero's expedition. None of us trusted them. Screams were still looping in the data that was recovered. Therefore, we developed a judgment that was not a steel weapon with a message. You can't pray for mankind without bleeding. The tall, clean steel walls of the corridor leading to the delegation room were humming. Marines stood alert every 20 feet because the force of our engines. Faces were too frigid to read, and I could see the fear in their eyes instead of battle. But the mystery of what we were going to bring aboard wasn't when I walked into the room. It was no longer a mystery but rather a threat. Using lovely language, the three Soldari were serene and elegant, and their faces were chiseled on in peace. But I had read the briefings about how they had taken two lesser species into slavery. Instead of exchanging favors, the galaxy required surrender as a form of peace. Compliance. And we were the first species to clench our fists in protest. Commander Hail, the lead Soldari song-like but rehearsed greeting, I nodded without grinning, saying, on behalf of the Council of Unconcordant Species, we welcome humanity to the stars. I acknowledge your greeting on behalf of Earth and her colonies. The translator buzzed faintly as behind me. Our diplomatic officials sat rigidly while exchanging words. You greet the ships with smiles thinner than paper. Second, Soldari observed that although his tone was polite, it had a faint edge. I didn't think twice about your habit. You bring millennia of conquest to Thetabal. We felt it was appropriate to temporarily even out the mood. The room was still. Soldari examined me. Their gaze shifted to the revolving hollows of judgment overhead. At last, the third person at the center table lowered her voice. Earth has created something powerful, but it is not essential, and there will be no conflict between us. I leaned forward a little because we didn't develop her for combat. So that shackles wouldn't accompany peace. That's when the Soldari realized that perhaps not our language or culture, but the reason the stars shuddered was because we weren't afraid of conflict. If someone attempted to force us to kneel, we were ready to put an end to it once and for all. The conference went on with empty promises of cultural exchange and politeness, of trade, but I could sense the tension simmering beneath the surface like magma. They hadn't anticipated that we would go this far so quickly, or that Earth would construct a fleet that dwarfed everything known as. The delegation departed and was taken back to their fleets, their shuttle. So I waited and watched from the VIEWPORT. With his arms folded, Captain Levinson joined me and said, "They bought it?" he inquired, and I shook my to assault. Use the number they're recalculating. To submit, I added in a hushed voice. We brought a ship because they just met a species that doesn't follow their rules. To clarify, the galaxy wasn't prepared for humanity, but we were, and the stars would. After Solari went, things didn't go back to normal and would never be the same. That normal no longer existed, not after Judgment or Earth's final stand came online. I barely slept the entire night in my quarters, and the silence was oppressive. I used to enjoy that silence because it felt pure, even though you were holding your breath too long and knew no one was coming to save you. However, it now whispered back that they were preparing something, and I could sense it. Watched a delegation video 3 times before dawn, going over their faces frame by frame to see how when we revealed the readouts of Judgment's weapons, the senior delegates' hands twitched at the mention of Mars. They weren't impressed. They were simply afraid. They were experiencing the kind of stress that breeds desperation and despair. Instead of negotiating, adversaries sabotage. At 0600, Captain Levinson called in the scans from senior officers in War Room 3 revealed odd readings on Deck 42 stated. Tech said it could be a glitch. I don't believe in glitches, not today. Here everyone was aware that the fusion cores to relay deep was located on Deck 42. Sufficiently within the ship that any disruption there indicated that someone was attempting to prevent us from. Levinson went on. I want complete lockdown on all systems that aren't necessary for life support and propulsion. I want answers, not assumptions. And I want Hale to lead a black operations recon team into 42. I'll take Sergeant Maddox and his team. I nodded. Maddox was the worst. Incredibly harsh, merciless, and 10 seconds away from choking someone, but devoted. He had buried his loyalty in that vicious, ingrained way that you can no longer teach. Family beneath Europa's ashes when the Saldari peacekeepers cleared the colony. He refused to accept diplomacy. Desired vengeance, so he dressed in black armor that shone in the emergency reds. Every area of the ship had eyes now, pulsing across the auxiliary pathways. Yet even judgment's sensors could. As we made our way down to Deck 42, you would be fooled if you knew how the Saldari knew. I told the team to be minimally involved unless it was absolutely necessary. We secure the device in case it's sabotaged, and if it's a sleeper agent, we take them alive if possible. But if not, Maddox laughed. You know what I like best, I mumbled, which is why I'm in it. Became colder as we approached the core. And it wasn't just a physical phenomenon. Others, including the ship itself, were aware that we were approaching a betrayal that would burn slowly before blowing up in our faces. We discovered a tiny distortion field after breaking through the outer ring of 42. However, Maddox tapped his visor while actively camouflaging something in the relay bay. We have technology. Saldari's distinctive energy spectrum from outside the solar system doesn't match anything that humans have already scanned. This commander turned the data to my HUD. Therefore, you won't like him. It was a sleeper spike that was utilized to cause meltdowns. Not only sabotage. Circumstances and fusion relays concealed under a Boeing extraterrestrial emissary and a facade of diplomacy. They had smuggled. AI glanced at the instrument as the damned death switch was turned. On the ship they grinned as they planted this, as they always do. And Maddox snarled. I collaborated with 2 engineers to disarm the spike because it was complicated and we didn't have time to be upset. Maddox. Covered in harmonic dampeners that would have escaped the majority of scans. They intended for it to only activate if it was triggered by weapons became necessary when we needed to defend ourselves. Finally, Maddox let out a deep breath and turned to face me after we had deactivated the gadget. Now, let's pretend it was a diplomatic misunderstanding and submit a memo to the command. I examined the disabled device and the silent betrayal it symbolized. Moreover, we ensure that the Saldari are aware of the consequences of lying to us. We had the communication lines open when I got back, so we didn't need to call a war council. He claimed that the council still desires the voice, flat, and that they attempted to blow up our center using the haughtiness of the Empire to talk about the next steps. But I believe that you and I already know what the next step is because they have already entered our doors. I nodded. Want to demonstrate to them what people do when someone snatches the chain for an hour by negotiating with a leash around our necks.